They showed up wearing uniforms, badges, radios, even fake tactical gear, called themselves HOA enforcement officers, told me they were authorized to inspect my ranch. One of them even tried to force the gate open. Big mistake, because the ranch they tried to raid belongs to a decorated Navy SEAL veteran, me. And what these wannabe cops didn't know is that I don't call 911 when trouble shows up. I make the rules here. And what followed next flipped the entire neighborhood. Upside down, they thought they were staging a power move, but they just walked into their own takedown. It started just after 6 a.m., that eerie, quiet hour when even the coyotes are too tired to howl. I was sipping my first coffee on the porch, scanning the horizon like I always did. That's when I saw the convoy roll up. 2 black SUVs with no plates, no markings, just clean, shiny, and government-looking. The kind of overdone clean that screams not real. 3 men stepped out, each one wearing dark tactical gear with HOA. Enforcement stitched across the chest in bold letters. Tactical vests, radios, batons. One even had a badge clipped to his belt, swinging like he meant business. They walked like they'd done this before, but I could tell right away these guys weren't military, weren't cops. Their posture was off. No situational awareness, no formation. Just a weak parade acting tough. And yet they moved with confidence, like they owned the place. That's what made it dangerous. They reached the front gate and started banging on, yelling for me to open up. You're in violation of HOA Code 47C. Open the gate immediately, sir. Violation? At a ranch that's been in my family for 3 generations? My ranch sits outside the HOA district. Always has. That's why I bought it. No one tells me how high my grass can be or where I can put a fence. But here they were, pretending they had jurisdiction. I walked up to the gate, calm as ever, and asked for a warrant. The tallest one sneered. We don't need one. This is an HOA directive. Your property's been flagged for non-compliance. By whom? I asked. By the board, he snapped. Now open up or we'll enter by force. Enter by force? That was bold. Stupid, but bold. I studied their gear, none of it standard issue. The radios weren't even transmitting. The guy with the badge? It was a toy prop, literally. You could see the plastic mold seam. Their boots were mismatched, tactical vests, half-strapped. Not a single one had a sidearm. These guys weren't professionals. They were playing dress-up. But I didn't let on. Instead, I smiled and played along. What exactly am I out of compliance with? I asked. The second guy, shorter, stockier, stepped forward with a clipboard. Unauthorized livestock. Your perimeter fence violates aesthetic. Code. And there's an unapproved structure on the south side of the property. He was talking about my barn. Built by hand, with permits. Years before this so-called HOA even formed in the next town over, I asked for documentation. He refused. Then they crossed the line, literally. Without permission, one of them reached over the gate and unlatched it. I didn't stop him. I just let the gate creak open as they walked in like they were starring in their own action movie. That was mistake number 1. They spread out across my gravel driveway like they were conducting a sweep. The short guy started, taking pictures of my barn. The other 2 walked toward my livestock pens, muttering about code violations. I gave them enough rope. Let them wander deeper onto the property. Let them feel like they were in control. Meanwhile, I activated the cameras I'd installed across the ranch. Military-grade surveillance, all rolling silently. Then I texted a buddy of mine. He's with the local sheriff's office. Told him we might have some impersonators trying to make trouble. Back at the gate, I called out, "You boys sure you're ready for this kind of inspection?" The leader turned, annoyed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "you're on private land. That's not governed by your HOA. You're operating outside your jurisdiction, which makes this an unlawful entry. Trespassing at the very least." The smirk faded. "We're authorized," Not without ID, you're not. I walked toward them, calm but firm. Every step I watched their confidence unravel. The tall one started backing off from the livestock pen. The short one fumbled his phone. The third guy looked like he wanted to run. That's when I saw it, a piece of paper in the clipboard. A fake violation notice, poorly printed, no letterhead, no official HOA contact. It was amateur hour. I knew right then. This wasn't just a rogue inspection. This was an intimidation play. Someone wanted to send a message, someone with an agenda, and I had a good idea who. But they didn't know what they'd walked into. They thought I was just some stubborn rancher with a grudge. What they didn't know was that I'd spent 12 years in special operations. I've done recon in hostile zones, disarmed ambushes, and taken down better-trained men than these three with nothing but my hands and instinct. So if they wanted to play war, they just picked the wrong battlefield, and I wasn't planning to. Go easy. I didn't flinch when they started walking further into the ranch. That's what they were hoping for, intimidation. Most people would panic at the sight of three so-called enforcement officers poking around their land. But intimidation only works if the other guy plays along. I've seen real fear. Felt it in the dust of Afghanistan, the sweat of night ops, the roar of helicopter blades over live fire. Whatever these clowns thought they were doing didn't even register on my pulse. I started asking questions, not out of curiosity, but as a tactic. The best way to unravel a lie is to press on the details. I walked up to the guy in charge, the tall one with the fake badge, and asked him what division of the HOA Enforcement Council he was part of. His brow twitched. That was the first crack. Local. Enforcement, he said, vague and mumbled. Yeah? I nodded. Which region? District 4, he replied, almost instantly. Too fast. Interesting, I said, because District 4 HOA doesn't operate outside county lines. And this ranch ain't in county jurisdiction. He paused, then covered. We've been given special expansion authority due to an emergency resolution passed last quarter. Now I knew he was winging it. HOA resolutions are public record. I'd been keeping tabs since they first started creeping into the neighboring developments. There was no resolution, no expansion, no emergency clause. This was fiction, built on confidence and hope that I wouldn't know better. That was mistake number 2. I asked the short guy what the Code 47C violation meant. He flipped through his clipboard, pretending to search. It's livestock contamination. Procedures, he blurted out. Relating to runoff. Wrong again. I leaned in, voice low. Code 47C relates to holiday decoration guidelines. Want to try again? The man stuttered, then backed off. I watched their eyes shift, like they were waiting for someone to take the lead, that someone didn't exist, because this wasn't an HOA action. It was a staged intrusion. The only question now was, why? I glanced over at my barn and realized the back doors had been cracked open. One of them must have slipped in while the others were keeping me talking. That's when I knew this wasn't about code violations. This was about access. They were here to find something or plant something. I stopped playing nice. You've got 30 seconds to leave this property, I said flatly. I don't care if you're wearing a cape and a judge's robe. This land is sovereign. You're trespassing, and I've got footage, timestamps, and legal proof to back it up. The tallest guy stepped forward again, puffing up. You touch us, and it's assault on a government official. That was it. I almost laughed. You're not government. You're not law enforcement. You're not even private security. You're impersonating officers of a homeowners association on record, on camera, and without jurisdiction. You want to test how that holds up in court? He faltered. I saw it in the way he looked to his left, then to his right. The false authority was crumbling. The act was dying under the weight of facts. But instead of backing down, he doubled. Down! We're not leaving! He barked. You're obstructing enforcement! So I pulled out my phone and made a call loud enough for all of them to hear. Sheriff's office, I've got 3 men on my property impersonating law enforcement. I believe they may be armed and are attempting unlawful entry into my barn. I have surveillance and visual ID. Request immediate dispatch." Their eyes went wide. The short one took 2 steps back. The third guy, still hovering near the livestock pens, started walking fast toward the gate. The tall one stood his ground for a second longer, then muttered something about not being finished with this. But I knew they were done. And not just with me. I wasn't the only one they'd pulled this stunt on. I'd heard whispers from neighbors down the road, people who'd been harassed, cited, even fined by the HOA for things that didn't apply. Some paid just to make it stop. Others stayed quiet. I didn't. I never do. As they backed out, I caught a name tag on the clipboard. Officer Trent. A fake, of course, but a thread I could pull. These guys weren't smart enough to scrub every detail. And now I had video, voice recordings, and a fast-developing paper trail. The sheriff's deputy arrived 10 minutes later. I handed him everything. Timestamps, video clips, even the fake violation form. He took one look and said, "These guys are in serious trouble if they claim to be cops." They claimed more than that, I told him. They claimed jurisdiction. They didn't have, which means someone in the HOA is sending them. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't random. This wasn't just a few idiots playing Rambo. Someone high up had orchestrated this. Someone with motive. Someone who thought I was a threat. And they were absolutely right. By nightfall, I had a plan. And it wasn't just about proving a point anymore. It was about exposing whoever was behind this circus. I've always believed that when someone draws first blood on your turf, you don't just hold the line. You pull them in, make them overplay their hand, and then hit back with precision. That's what we did overseas, and that's what I was about to do here. Turn their bogus intimidation game into a legal and tactical disaster for them. First, I combed through the footage from all the cameras I'd mounted around the ranch, visible and hidden. Every step those fake enforcers took was recorded in crisp HD. Them breaking the latch on my gate, photographing my barn, pushing open the rear entrance, and poking around the livestock area. I even caught the moment one of them tried slipping, something under a stack of hay bales. I marked the timestamp, grabbed gloves, and recovered the object later. It was a cheap USB drive, wrapped in a Ziploc bag. I didn't open it. I wasn't going to risk my system on whatever trap they planted. Instead, I tagged it as evidence and stored it in a fireproof lockbox. Next, I called in a few favors. Old unit buddies, men who now worked in everything from cybersecurity to federal enforcement to private intel. One of them, Jack, specialized in digital forensics. I mailed the USB to his office overnight under a burner ID. Told him to scan it in a sandboxed environment, see what popped up. While that was happening, I did my own digging, cross-referenced the Officer Trent name badge with public databases, social media, and even HOA-related forums. I found a guy by that name listed as a security consultant for a private firm contracted by multiple HOAs in the county. Bingo. A little deeper digging showed the firm had no law enforcement licensing, had been fined twice for impersonation, allegations, and had a pending lawsuit from a resident in a different district. That was the thread. And I had just started pulling. But a sting needs bait, and I was ready to serve it. The next day, I drafted a response letter, not to the HOA, but to the board president herself. I worded it very carefully, subtly suggesting that I'd be out of town for a week and that the property would be unmonitored. I let it slip that the barn, yes, the same one they showed keen interest in, contained archived HOA records I'd collected from neighbors for a pending report to the county. That letter was printed, folded, and hand-delivered by a friend posing as a landscaping contractor. I knew the HOA board watched every move on this property. I just needed to plant the idea that if they wanted to eliminate whatever dirt they feared I had on them, the time to strike was now. Meanwhile, I went operational. Cameras were checked, repositioned, and synced to a live monitoring system my buddy set up remotely. I moved my animals to a safe location off-site, gave the excuse that they needed vet treatment to cover my tracks. Then I rigged the barn. Not with weapons, obviously. I'm not looking to end up in court. But I did set up enough surveillance. Motion sensors and pressure-activated alerts that if a mosquito sneezed near that door, I'd know about it. And I waited. On the third night, just past midnight, I got the ping. 3 heat signatures approaching from the road. No headlights. They parked half a mile out and hiked in through the south tree line. Real amateur hour stealth. They thought they were ghosting in undercover, but the infrared cameras had them in full view. Same 3 from before, this time dressed in black. Hoodies and ski masks. They slipped through the gate, went straight for the barn. One of them had bolt cutters. Another carried a crowbar. The third had a duffel bag. I could only guess what was inside. Tools, planting equipment, evidence to frame me. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I wanted everything documented. The moment they breached the barn door, my system auto-triggered a full light flood. Every bulb in the area snapped on. Inside the barn, hidden speakers blasted a recorded sheriff's dispatch warning. "You are being recorded. Law enforcement has been notified. Exit the property immediately." They panicked. 2 of them bolted. The third tripped over a crate and fell face first into the feed trough. That's when I stepped out holding nothing but my phone, all ready, live streaming to a private law enforcement server my buddy had set up earlier. I didn't need to say a word. Within 5 minutes, flashing red and blue cut through the night. The sheriff himself showed up. He'd been waiting for my signal. Deputies cuffed the intruder who hadn't managed to run and secured the barn. The USB had been cloned and analyzed. Jack called me minutes later to confirm it was loaded with incriminating files and a fake trail designed to tie me to some kind of HOA fraud scheme. It was a setup, pure and simple. Now I had footage of them planting it, footage of them returning to destroy it. And one of their team in custody, they thought they were walking into a vulnerable ranch owned by a clueless vet. What they walked into was a trap, built by a Navy SEAL with a memory like a steel trap and zero tolerance for cowards hiding behind fake badges. And this time, they left behind more than just broken laws. They left behind names, connections, evidence. And I was just getting started. Once the masked trespasser was cuffed and stuffed into the back of a squad car, things moved. Fast, but not fast enough for me. I was running on pure adrenaline and a firestorm of calculated rage. The sheriff, an old acquaintance from my military outreach days, gave me a look that said, "You weren't kidding." We both knew this wasn't just an isolated act of trespassing. It was part of a bigger web of fraud and impersonation that had to be unraveled completely. And the trap had worked better than either of us hoped. The guy we caught, mid-30s, shaved head, wearing tactical boots with the soles still dusty from their last job, refused to give his name at first, claimed he was just following orders. But when they ran his prints back at the station, everything started to fall into place. His real name? Dylan Kravitz. No law enforcement record, but he was listed as an operations specialist for a private HOA security firm, the same one I'd flagged earlier, the same one with multiple lawsuits pending and a reputation for pushing boundaries way past legal. With Kravitz in custody and the footage I'd provided, the sheriff greenlit search warrants for both the HOA board office and the security firm's off-site storage unit, located 2 towns over. They struck both simultaneously. What they found was a treasure trove: forged documents, fake badges, digital blueprints of homes and properties marked for enforcement sweeps, including mine, and what shocked even the sheriff was a hit list of homeowners labeled non-compliant with attached instructions to intimidate, document weaknesses, and prepare evidence. They weren't just bullying. They were organized, strategic. A small paramilitary-style operation cloaked under the legal ambiguity of HOA authority. And this wasn't limited to my ranch. There were names of over 30 properties across the state. Now here's where things got really interesting. The warrants also uncovered communications, emails and encrypted messages between members of the HOA board and the firm's senior staff. One email in particular sealed the deal. It was from the HOA president herself, forwarded to a field team lead, and it read, "Ensure he's discredited before the zoning complaint reaches the commission. Use whatever force is necessary, but make it look like a legal enforcement. Sweep. He's ex-military, so keep it clean. No casualties." That was their mistake, right there in writing. They'd acknowledged my military background, instructed use of force, and conspired to interfere with a government zoning report I'd been preparing, a report that would have exposed illegal land deals and environmental violations tied to the HOA's newest development project. That was their motive. The sheriff handed everything over to the district attorney within 48 hours. Suddenly, local media caught wind of the story. The headlines were wild. Fake HOA cops raided decorated veterans' ranch. Private security. Firm linked to HOA intimidation scheme. Navy SEAL exposes illegal enforcement ring. But I wasn't interested in headlines. I wanted justice. I filed civil suits, one against the security firm, one against the HOA board, and a third against the individuals who had physically trespassed on my land. My lawyers, both veterans themselves, moved like a storm. With the footage, the digital evidence, and witness statements, including my wife, our neighbors, and even the sheriff, the case was rock solid. That wasn't the only fallout. Several board members resigned overnight. One fled the state. The security firm dissolved within a week, claiming financial insolvency. But I wasn't done. I traced their license to a shell company managed by a bigger corporate network that had contracts with dozens of other HOAs in surrounding states. The corruption wasn't just local, it was systemic. So I made another call to an investigative journalist I'd met during a veterans advocacy project. She was hungry for something explosive. I gave her everything. Within days, her expose aired on national television. HOA watchdog groups picked it up. Forums exploded. Homeowners across the country started questioning their own board practices, filing information requests, demanding transparency. The story went viral. And me? I became the face of resistance. Reluctantly, but necessarily. People started reaching out to me with their stories. Some had been fined thousands for invisible violations. Others had their homes broken into for inspections. One family had their dog euthanized without their consent after an HOA claimed it was dangerous. These weren't just petty tyrants. This was abuse of power on a coordinated level. So I leaned in, used my training, my background, my connections. I started a small nonprofit called Veterans for Civil Integrity, aimed at protecting homeowners, especially veterans and elderly folks, from corrupt HOAs and pseudo-authority enforcers. The board that once tried to erase my name from the neighborhood was now erased themselves, from positions of power, from respect, from any chance of intimidating another soul again. And the best part? The ranch is mine, still standing, untouched, stronger than ever. Every inch of it now protected, registered, and recognized under multiple layers of legal shields. I built it to be a sanctuary. They tried to turn it into a battleground. They failed. Because no matter how they disguised themselves, badges, uniforms, titles, you don't raid a SEAL's home and expect to leave unscathed. And they'll remember that forever. The aftermath hit like a tidal wave, and the ripple effects went far beyond what I'd anticipated. What started as a single act of impersonation had unraveled into a scandal that shook the foundation of our entire HOA and exposed the president as the mastermind behind it all. It began with the forensic audit the sheriff's department launched after the raids. Once the DA had their hands on the forged emails, fake security contracts, and illegal surveillance plans, it was clear this wasn't just some rogue operation run by a few hired goons. This was systematic, calculated, directed from the top. The HOA president, Eleanor Griggs, had maintained a perfect public image, retired school principal, active in local charities, always smiling for the cameras at neighborhood events. But behind that porcelain facade was a woman obsessed with control. She'd orchestrated a campaign of harassment designed to intimidate homeowners into silence, compliance, or outright surrender of property. And the more the evidence piled up, the clearer it became that this wasn't her first time playing puppet master. The biggest bombshell came when investigators traced back the shell company tied to the fake HOA cops. Financial records revealed that Eleanor had been diverting HOA dues into a personal slush fund. Over $400,000 had disappeared in 2 years, money supposedly meant for community upgrades and repairs. Instead, it had funded illegal surveillance equipment, unregistered firearms, and, most disturbingly, payments to private investigators tasked with digging into the personal lives of problem homeowners. Her goal was simple: root out dissenters, discredit them, and crush any resistance before it could spread. I had just been the latest target, one she clearly underestimated. When Eleanor was arrested, the footage went viral. Her signature red blazer, disheveled, makeup running, shouting that it was all a conspiracy as officers led her into the courthouse. But the public didn't buy it, not with the evidence plastered across every news site and social feed. Homeowners, both in our neighborhood and beyond, flooded online forums with their own horror stories. Some even claimed Eleanor had once served on their boards too, using aliases, manipulating elections, always leaving just before the heat caught up to her. Turns out, she'd been gaming the HOA system for over a decade. Her arraignment came quickly. She was charged with embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, impersonating law enforcement by proxy, criminal harassment, and violating both state and federal statutes around wire fraud and privacy invasion. Her bail was denied. The DA called her a domestic warlord cloaked in suburban respectability. But Eleanor wasn't the only casualty. 3 other board members were indicted for aiding and abetting, having signed off on the shady security contracts and approved funding that clearly violated bylaws. One fled the state. He was caught in Arizona 2 days later. Another tried to claim ignorance, but her name was all over the forged minutes that had authorized illegal compliance raids. The third broke almost immediately, turned state's witness in exchange for a lighter sentence. Meanwhile, with the board decimated, the HOA itself imploded. A temporary legal injunction froze all activities. Dues collection was halted. Every single bylaw was under review. Homeowners demanded a full audit and the formation of a new, transparent governing body. Some even called for the HOA to be dissolved entirely, and lawsuits started flying from every direction. My civil case? It gained teeth the moment Eleanor was booked. With her personal assets frozen and her reputation obliterated, the path to restitution became clear. My legal team, bolstered by national media attention and pro bono support from veteran advocacy groups, filed for damages, property intrusion, emotional distress, defamation, and attempted sabotage of a federal zoning process. The estimated claim? North of $2.5 million. But for me, the real victory was watching justice work. Slowly, relentlessly, just like I was trained. Other neighborhoods reached out. I started getting invitations to speak at town halls, webinars, HOA reform panels. My story had become more than a headline. It became a rallying cry for accountability. Even federal agencies took notice. A congressional committee opened an inquiry into abusive HOA practices nationwide, citing our case as the catalyst. Whispers of legislative reform began to surface. Stricter regulations on private enforcement, clearer limits on HOA authority, and criminal penalties for misuse of power. It was bigger than just me now. Way bigger. As for the ranch, my home, it's Never been stronger. We installed even more advanced security, not just because of what happened, but because I'll never let something like that happen again. My wife, bless her, never let fear take root. She stood by me, stronger than ever. And every day I walk our land, I remember why we fought back. Not just to protect what's ours, but to make sure no one else gets steamrolled by a rogue HOA, hiding behind a smile. I'm a former Navy SEAL. I've faced enemies across oceans, but this battle right here at home was one of the toughest and most personal I've ever fought, and I won. Not just for me, but for every homeowner who's ever been bullied, silenced, or threatened in the name of community standards. Because power unchecked isn't order, it's tyranny, and I wasn't about to let tyranny win on my watch. If this story fired you up, made you clench your fists, or even just opened your eyes to how deep HOA abuse can go, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now, because this isn't just a one-time battle. It's a war for fairness, for justice, and for homeowners everywhere who've been pushed too far. I'm exposing every shocking twist, every corrupt move, and every Karen who thinks they're above the law, right here on the HOA Stories. So, stick around, because next time, it could be your street I'm talking about.